It's been 13 years since Gossip Girl ended, and somehow this show still manages to hang around the culture like an ex you thought you were done with. Even if you're like me and didn't watch it live on the CW, you know the vibe: rich kids, petty drama, and text blasts that could end friendships before lunch. But when you revisit it as an adult, something hits different. You start to realize Gossip Girl did more than shape fashion trends and Tumblr edits. It shaped how a whole generation understood love, especially the complicated kind. So today, we're not just revisiting the drama, we're looking at why so many of us rooted for couples who clearly were not built for long term happiness. And what that says about TV, fandoms, and honestly, about us too. And yes, I'll sprinkle in a few of my own takes. I mean, what's a Gossip Girl deep dive without a little scandal? One thing Gossip Girl mastered was making conflict look luxurious. Every betrayal was bathed in golden lighting. Every argument sounded like it belonged in a movie. Every bad decision came with an outfit so good you almost forgot someone's feelings were getting trampled. And because everything looked so expensive, the show tricked our brains into seeing certain relationships as romantic when they were simply intense. It's like, yes, what he did was questionable, but look at the skyline behind them. Maybe it's meaningful. That formula didn't stay on the Upper East Side either. You saw versions of it on shows like Pretty Little Liars and The Vampire Diaries. The same pattern: make the conflict stylish enough, and people will start calling it fate. And honestly, there were moments where even I paused, like, hold on, maybe he's not that bad. Then reality kicked right back in. That's the power of well produced storytelling. But once you stop letting the lighting seduce you, you start to notice what the writing was really doing. Which brings us back to Blair, the heartbeat of the series. Blair Waldorf is one of those characters we label with 10 different adjectives depending on the episode. People call her messy, brilliant, petty, iconic, complicated. The truth is, Blair was the emotional compass of the show, and also one of its most mishandled. From the beginning, Gossip Girl positioned Blair's relationship with Chuck as the central love story. And yes, the chemistry was loud. We all saw it. But chemistry isn't the same thing as emotional safety. A lot of what Chuck did would have had any real life friend group staging an intervention. He'd hurt her, apologize, reel her in, push her away, repeat. It created a pattern that felt dramatic, but never stable. And here's the part that really shifted the writing. Every time Blair began to grow, especially with Dan, the show flipped the table. Blair and Dan had something the series rarely gave its characters: genuine emotional maturity. They challenged each other, inspired each other, and created something built on understanding instead of adrenaline. But because the chair versus dare fandom war was loud, the writers responded to noise instead of nuance. So Blair's development didn't just stall, it reversed. Her story bent toward fan service, not the growth she earned. I understand why people became attached to her dynamic with Chuck: the tension, the history, the spark. But intensity and compatibility are not the same thing. And Blair's arc proves it, which leads us to the bigger picture. Why did we root for something that clearly couldn't sustain itself? When people defend certain TV couples, it isn't always about who's on screen. It's about what those characters evoke in them. We see pieces of ourselves or the versions of ourselves we hope to be, and we attach meaning to those characters like their memories. That's part of why Blair and Chuck became cultural fixtures. Not because their relationship was balanced, but because it felt familiar. The tension, the intensity, the unpredictability, it created the illusion of emotional depth. Television understands this well. It gives you small moments of sweetness, spaced out just enough to keep you invested. It's the emotional equivalent of leaving the door cracked. Not enough to walk through, but enough to keep you curious. Then there's the power of fandoms. Once a community forms around a couple, it becomes an identity. Defending the couple starts to feel like defending themselves, or who they were when they watched the show. It's human. We cling to stories that got us through things, entertained us, distracted us, or simply kept us company. But it also means we sometimes overlook the harm layered beneath the pretty moments. The dramatic reunions overshadow the emotional damage, and the "we found our way back to each other" narrative overshadows why they kept breaking apart in the first place. And maybe that's why we're still talking about these couples. Not because they were healthy, but because the shows were good at making the damage feel meaningful. And once a story teaches you to equate the two, it's hard to unlearn it. Which brings us to the ending we got, and the one the characters deserved. When a story spends years building emotional momentum, how it ends matters. It's supposed to reflect the journey, not erase it for convenience. And with Gossip Girl, the finale felt rushed, neat, and disconnected from the growth the characters worked towards. So here's a version that respects who they were becoming, not who the fandom wanted them to be. Blair and Dan, a partnership built on mutual understanding, ambition, and emotional clarity. Not perfect, just honest. Two people choosing each other because they learned how to show up fully. Serena, someone who needed space and time more than she needed another relationship. Her story was always about trying to find herself in the middle of loud, conflicting identities. And marriage was never the answer to that. What she needed was room to travel, to explore, to define herself on her own terms. And here's the part that often gets overlooked. If Serena did have long-term potential with anyone, it wasn't Dan. It was Nate. Their beginnings were messy. I'll admit that. Betraying Blair cast a long shadow. But they grew beyond that. They matured into people who genuinely understood each other's insecurities and strengths. Nate offered something Serena rarely had, steadiness. And Serena offered Nate something he often lacked, vision and depth. They could have balanced each other out beautifully without the constant emotional landmines. But even then, Serena's ending didn't really need a relationship at all. A season or two of being unattached and grounded would have made for more sense for her arc than a rush walk down the aisle. Lily and Rufus, a couple defined by balance, not chaos. Their breakup in the show felt like an undoing of their entire arc. A better ending honors their work, not rewrites it. Chuck, he keeps the wealth, the businesses, the legacy, but not Blair. Growth isn't guaranteed just because the script wants it. Some characters age, some evolve, and some stay exactly who they are. Nate's ending was the rare moment where the show got it right. Focusing on his career, finding stability, and choosing himself for once actually fit his journey. He wasn't the dramatic centerpiece, but he didn't need to be. He was the calm in a world built on storms. Serena could have benefited from a season of doing exactly what Nate did, choosing herself first. Jenny, the twist that actually fits. She had motive, insight, and proximity. Jenny, with Dorota as her partner, closing her chapter by stepping into her own power. That's an ending with impact. A finale rooted in accountability, not just aesthetics. This ending doesn't punish anyone. It simply aligns the characters with the truth of who they became. And maybe that's the real lesson under all the glitter. That love isn't defined by what you survive together, but by who you are when the noise stops. So that's our deep dive into the Upper East Side. Not the nostalgia, but the patterns underneath it. And revisiting these stories as adults gives us clarity we just didn't have back then. Not to tear them apart, but to understand why they left such a mark in the first place. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you're tuned in for the next part of the series. We're heading to Rosewood next, where a student-teacher relationship became a fan favorite storyline, and somehow no one blinked. Thank you for listening or watching, whichever way you're here. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.